One sort of change that learners identified through the SEAL activities are changes that they can make happen. It links to the importance of self-efficacy and having their voices heard. And of course, these are both key themes in the whole school approach, so an important subtopic of change. This, if you are able to now, watch the first 1 minute and 10 seconds of this video. It's a lovely, lovely example of children at a primary school in Australia identifying changes that they want to happen to their community, to the world, and actually going about making them happen in the first 5 minutes of every school day. As you watch it, perhaps you like to think about how you might use the video as a stimulus to begin this part of children's work on change. Do enjoy it. We found it fun and uplifting, really, and I think potentially very inspiring for other young people, so enjoy it. This subtopic links to a number of progression steps, mainly within What Matters Statement 3, which focuses on how our actions and our decisions impact on the lives of ourselves and other people. Within What Matters Statement 5, which focuses on relationships and our rights and the rights of other people, an area which is often the focus of change, of course, at a group and at a societal level. And again, in the SEAL materials, there's a similar progression in learning outcomes, which can be found in the overview to each theme in the primary booklets, and as we said earlier, kind of across the themes within the secondary materials. So the important focus within SEAL is to develop students' sense of themselves as having agency and self-efficacy, which is of course linked to them feeling that they have a voice, perhaps in how the school is run. So these themes are covered primarily in the Going for Goals material in primary and the Keep on Learning materials in secondary, which looks at making changes where necessary using reflection and evaluation of my actions, of their actions and so on. But the theme of changes sort of harnesses this prior learning to encourage students to bring about change in themselves and in their environment, and so, you know, the school environment, the classroom environment, but also within their community. So, for example, in the foundation materials, they're encouraged to, as a group, make changes to the outdoor area or to their classroom. In year 1, the focus is getting better at their learning, or changing something in the classroom that might support that. So perhaps changing the noise level that they are aiming for example. Year 2, the focus is on changing our behaviour and looking at habits and how they're formed and how difficult they are really to change. Year 3, they make an individual plan to change something about themselves at home or at school. And in year 5 and 6, the change really is looked at in terms of the kind of curriculum links. So in history, in literacy, looking at social changes. And here we've got some examples: Martin Luther King, the changes that he brought about in the civil rights movement, Gandhi, and this little girl here is actually Floella Benjamin, who used to present Play School. Those of my generation may remember, but she wrote an autobiography called Coming to England, looking at the changes that how those were negotiated by somebody coming with the Windrush generation. So 3 lovely ideas there to follow up. I'm going to look at a couple of sample activities on the theme of making change happen to give a flavour of how this aspect of change might be introduced. This is a fun little starter from year 2. Can actually be used quite at any age, really. It's a fun one. We've even used it at staff meetings. So just take a moment to read through that. I won't read it to you. This activity, it's a year 1 activity, and it encourages children to use these kind of Venn diagrams of then, now, and then both in the middle, to get children to consider which of all the changes that they can come up with that have happened perhaps since they started school or since they were a baby, whatever you want to focus on, but which of those changes that they've actually made happen. So learning to ride a bike, for example, or learning to read, these are things that they have made happen, and having a focus on those changes. And it's a really nice introduction into the idea that we can change things about ourselves, including our behaviour, although this can be hard, as the next video and activity show. So this is a little video. It's quite fun. It's good to use in the classroom, perhaps as a stimulus, but also again in the staff room. It's quite a nice one to introduce the idea of change being, you know, quite hard, and why this might be so. So even this highlights really how even a very simple behaviour is quite hard to change and feels quite uncomfortable, and takes a lot of practice and so on to make to kind of embed the change. So if you watch this now for about 2 minutes 13 seconds, that's quite precise, isn't it? And think about whether it might be something that you can use with your students. So in the year 2 activities, children are invited to do the clasping hand and which thumbs on top challenge that we've just seen in the video, and a couple of similar activities. For example, changing which arm goes on top when you fold your arms, and certainly does feel quite odd. And there's a particularly lovely one that I really like, which is the challenge to eat a donut without licking your lips. And that's quite a big change because, of course, when we eat a donut, we're always licking our lips, and it's really, really hard to succeed at that. And another lovely one, I think, for the staff room. In year 2, there's also an activity that challenges children to decide on something they'd like to change in the classroom to support their learning. So making the classroom less noisy, it could be. Then they work in groups to talk about how they might make this happen and share ideas, voting to find the most popular idea and then implementing it. So, you know, really good kind of practical stuff around making change happen in the classroom. And of course, this does link very well to the idea of setting a goal that they'll have covered in the theme Going for Goals. So, you know, questions about how do they know what they want to achieve, making small steps to achieve their overall goal, thinking about the obstacles that might get in the way, thinking about who might help them, all those things that they can use to reinforce the bits that they have previously thought about in the Going for Goals materials. Another lovely way that teachers have talked to us about in terms of looking at how children might bring about change in the wider society is to look at what jobs and roles they might be thinking about from, you know, a very young age. You can do this activity. Some excellent discussion to be had, looking at what changes the roles that they think they might take when they grow up, what sort of changes those roles might bring about. So here we've got a lovely display of future world changes, which I thought I'd share with you. Older learners, you might think about quotes like this as part of a plenary or a review session. You might ask, you know, what do you think this means? Why might it be wiser to try and change yourself rather than try to change the world to start with? And similar kind of considerations. Of course, there's many quotes that you could use alongside or as well as this one. And finally, in this section, you might like to pause the presentation now to consider undertaking the tasks that are suggested on this slide. And I would just add, when you read through the activity, that the video is really worth watching. It's an excellent neuroscientific explanation in layperson's terms of why we find making Change is hard. Yeah, well worth watching. So I hope you enjoy that.